Today, the first Nvidia Super GPU has been spotted. Nvidia's GPU power cable is a disaster. AMD promises to fix this, a huge surprise for Nvidia and AMD owners, and next-gen AMD and Intel CPUs get a release date. Welcome everyone to Gamer Meld. First up for today, Nvidia Super GPUs are right around the corner. We're talking early January, so not far off at all. And because of that, their upcoming GPUs are now being spotted. This right here is the RTX 4070 Super by ASUS. It's their dual OC GPU, and as you can see right off the back, it actually comes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And I'll actually get to those specs in just 1 second, but before that, let's actually take a look at the card itself and compare it to their regular 4070 OC GPU. Starting things off, you can see that it does come with a 16-pin power connector, while before it was only an 8-pin. Not only that, but you'll see right here that there aren't any heat pipes or anything like that poking out, while now there are. There are a few other minor differences in the card, but really nothing that's that big of a deal. But what is a pretty big deal is the specs themselves. According to the leaks that we've seen so far, the 4070 Super looks to be the biggest jump over its non-Super counterpart. As you can see right here, it comes with a whopping 7,168 CUDA cores versus 5,888. And while it is still in between the 4070 Ti and regular 4070, it's still much closer to the full-blown 4070 Ti. Not only that, but when we compare it to the other Super cards, the 4070 Super looks to have the biggest jump by far. You can see the 4070 Ti Super still comes with quite a bit more cores at 8,448 versus 7,680, and then the 4080 Super really looks to be the least jump over its non-Super counterpart. So depending on price, the 4070 Super does look like it's set to be the GPU with the most performance difference over the non-Super counterpart, making it for one fast GPU. And speaking of fast, look at this little charger. Looks like your standard everyday charger with 3 outputs, except it's 100 watts. And yet it's so small that it only takes up a single US outlet. It's the Nexode Pro 100 watt charger from Ugreen, who sponsored this video. And if we compare it to this 20 watt charger that I've been using, with the fact that this folds up and this one doesn't, you can see that they're actually fairly close in size. Yet this one has 5 times the power. I'm talking it can give 100 watts of power to a single port to charge a 14-inch MacBook Pro from 0 to 86% in just 60 minutes. The Nexode Pro also supports a ton of charging protocols, and they're offering 15% off until the 31st when you visit my link in the description below. Oh, and did I mention it has overheating, overcharge, and excess current protection? This is the charger to have. Unless you need even more power, to which you can check out their epic 160 watt charger. Also 15% off in the description. But this is only until the 31st, so make sure to check that out like today. And next up for today, while Nvidia is looking to release some new cards that have some really good price to performance, they still have one major issue, and that's their power connector. As you can see right here, we have yet another story in the seemingly endless saga of problems for the RTX 40 series 16-pin power connector. This one comes from Seasonic, where they discuss a couple things that you can do. First off, as we've kind of seen before, you don't want to start bending it until after or at least 35 millimeters. So this right here is not good. This isn't good. This is good. Obviously, it is annoying to see that it's like there's so many rules for this connector. It's just a connector. This one, from what I understand, is so it doesn't over time pull out the connector, ultimately leading to it melting. But of course, we've already seen this one, but Seasonic recently actually released something that's pretty wild. You can see right here that when we're talking about putting bends in it, not only do you need to, make sure it's past or at least 35 millimeters past the connector itself, they also suggest carefully using a gentle heat source, like a hairdryer, to carefully heat the area of the cable where you wish to make the bend. And what's wild is that you can see right here, it actually mentions, it's actually up here as well. This is not just referring to the older 16-pin connector, but even the new 12V 2x6 cable. Don't forget that that cable was effectively made to make these cables safer, but apparently it's not going to be as great as we thought because they're still suggesting really weird stuff like using a hairdryer. Now, Seasonic has since retracted this. They don't suggest it for obvious reasons. You know, hair dryers can be very different heats. It can obviously mess up the cable. It could potentially melt things. I mean, it's pretty wild that they suggested it to begin with, but it is obvious why. It'll essentially soften it so it can bend much easier and kind of stay that way, and so it isn't really putting anywhere near as much pressure on that connector. Still, this is wild, and at least to me shows that this isn't an issue with user error or anything like that. This is clearly a major problem with the connector itself. And next up, for those who don't know, AMD has officially brought their Zen 4 C-Core to the consumer market. The Zen 4 C-Core is of course AMD's version of a little core similar to Intel's efficient cores that they brought in with their 12th gen CPUs. But while they both have big and little cores now, AMD has been doing something that is a little bit annoying. As you can see right here with the Z1 chip, which is basically made for handheld gaming, you can see right here it shows, okay, it has 2 Zen 4 cores and 4 Zen 4 C cores, but you'll then see that it has a max boost up to 4.9 GHz and a base of 3.2. The issue is that this doesn't give you the clocks of both the regular Zen 4 and Zen 4 C cores. And given that we're talking 4.9 GHz for max boost clock, it's almost certainly the regular Zen 4 cores. But when we look at Intel's cores, we can see that it actually separates the frequencies by their big and little cores. These are their performance cores, and that max turbo frequency is 5.1 GHz, with the efficient cores max being 3.9. Then we have performance base frequency at 3.2 and the efficient core base frequency of 2.4. So obviously this is a pretty big difference, and given the fact that we're seeing that this has more Zen 4 C cores than regular Zen 4 cores, obviously the boost and base clock for the 4 C cores is very, very important. Well, according to a new update, AMD is claiming that they are going to display more detailed specs for Zen 4C based Ryzen CPUs. They are apparently going to be updating product pages within the next few weeks, which I don't really fully understand why it couldn't be quicker than that, but still, this is a really great start. And next, we have a really awesome story that shows that AMD is giving performance more and more to not only AMD GPUs, but also Nvidia's. Recently, I went over a story that basically showed because AMD released the source code for FSR3 that they'd already gotten mods in there to bring FSR3 in games that already have DLSS 3. Once again, this is a huge reason why open source can be really awesome. Well, today, there's now a new mod that actually leaked where instead of requiring DLSS 3 to get FSR 3, you can now get FSR 3 in FSR 2 games. As you can see right here, it says AMD's FSR 3 frame generation technology can now be enabled in any FSR 2 game with the leaked mod, and it's supported across both Nvidia and AMD GPUs. Now, from what I'm hearing, it doesn't necessarily work with frame generation across all of these FSR 2 games, but really, any of them is an awesome and welcome change. Plus, you get some of the added benefits of FSR 3 besides frame generation, but frame generation is still a part of this. Don't forget that FSR 3 typically requires developers to actually implement it in their game. Now, AMD does have fluid motion frames, which is effectively frame generation at a driver level, but because they obviously can't make drivers for Nvidia GPUs, these are only on select AMD cards. But FSR 3 does work on Nvidia cards, and in fact, it works on more Nvidia cards than Nvidia's own DLSS 3, meaning AMD is giving more to Nvidia's GPUs than Nvidia themselves. Now, I will say that while this does seem to have leaked out, it originally comes from this user, Luke FZ, right here. So I'm gonna have his Patreon here. You really shouldn't download it unless you do have this, because that's why he has it here. Obviously, he works really hard on these modifications. So if you are interested in this, make sure to check out his Patreon. And lastly for today, they're coming AMD and Intel's next-gen CPUs. As you can see right here, it says AMD's next-gen 700 and Intel's 800 motherboard series could be coming in Q3 of 2024. Now this does come from the Board Channels forum, but supposedly it is channel partners in China where this is all coming from, so it very well could be correct, and of course we've gotten a ton of accurate leaks from Board Channels in the past. Regardless, this is both Intel and AMD's next generation motherboards, and with that obviously means their next generation CPUs. So that would mean Intel's 15th gen and maybe AMD's Ryzen 9000. Now I say 9000 because as you've recently seen, AMD has already released their 8000 CPUs. Obviously these are their mobile CPUs, but still this is just a small update. This isn't Zen 5 or anything like that, so AMD will likely go ahead and go for 9000 for their Zen 5 desktop as well as mobile CPUs. That's of course just my speculation, but that does seem like it's likely gonna happen. Regardless, be on the lookout in Q3 of next year. So while that does it for today, are you pumped for AMD and Intel's next-gen CPUs? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to pick up one of Ugreen's new either 100 or 160 watt chargers in the description below. And as always, have a great day.